without the age, excuse me, but this, you should care, because even without the age issue with Biden, there's going to be the Genocide Joe protesters at the convention. This is a split in the party.
But let me articulate this. I think that both parties have a real issue with anti-Semitism. And I don't think it has any place. I mean, I've seen the ads with the Star of David that you all ran in different House races.
Right.
I've heard the words that have come out of Donald Trump's mouth before. I mean, we can't turn a blind eye to the anti-Semitism that's in the Republican Party.
In today's video, Bakari Sellers schools Bill Maher on real time with Bill Maher as Bakari Sellers and Bill Maher clash over Donald Trump, voter turnout, and U.S. foreign policy. Bakari Sellers brings a sharper perspective that puts Bill Maher's arguments under pressure. So let's dive in and watch how Bakari Sellers shuts down Bill Maher on real time with Bill Maher.
The increase in voter turnout was so massive from 2016, unprecedentedly massive. The voting base increased by about 22 million voters. Normally it increases maybe 4 or 5 million voters per election cycle. What that means is that you're probably going to get closer to a reversion to the mean. I'd be shocked if you even get as many voters as you had in 2020 and 2024. And a lot of the voters who are not going to be, quote unquote, showing up, by which I mean like not using mail-in ballots.
What Democrats are doing to one another right now, they're guaranteeing Biden's going to lose. They're weakening every day.
Well,
and in the polling, Biden's the strongest one.
I actually argue that Democrats have done more damage to Joe Biden since January 27th, and June 27th, and probably June 27th.
The only person who's done worse still is himself. Biden.
Well, I mean, but at the end of the day, what I've been telling everyone is people analyze this race wrong. I mean, you literally had 3 choices in this race. You have Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and the couch. Those are your choices. And the couch is one of the most amazing candidates in the history of American politics.
Remember,
it runs no ads, and people choose it all the time. I mean,
Bobby Kennedy just shot up and went, what about the worm in my brain? All right. Well, what do you make of the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, pulling its endorsement of AOC for WTF? Okay. What do you make of the Democratic Socialists of America pulling its endorsement of AOC for not being sufficiently anti-Israel? Did that happen?
It did.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah. Well, I mean,
I was like I was in the who cares category.
Yeah. Same. I'm just looking for. Honestly, I'd like for the Democratic Party to pull its support from the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. That would be.
Well, I actually think
this is.
I think that
even without the age, excuse me, but this, you should care, because even without the age issue with Biden, there's going to be the Genocide Joe protesters at the convention. This is a split in the party.
But let me articulate this. I think that both parties have a real issue with anti-Semitism. And I don't think it has any place. I mean, I've seen the ads with the Star of David that you all ran in different House races.
Right.
I've heard the words that have come out of Donald Trump's mouth before. I mean, we can't turn a blind eye to the anti-Semitism that's in the Republican Party. We've seen January 6th. We saw people in Charlottesville yelling all the worst.
Here's where this comes in.
But hold on. Can I finish this thought? Can I finish this thought? Sure. Go for it. Okay. The way I wanted to bring this full circle is that, yes, Democrats have to combat the anti-Semitism that's within our own party as well. It needs to be rooted out completely from both parties. That's my only point. It has no place. It has no place in the American political.
I agree. I obviously agree, and I personally have been targeted more than probably anyone else in America by alt-right anti-Semites. Okay, like truly by the statistics, as a conservative. Now, let me say that the vast disproportion of people who are anti-Semitic in America right now, unfortunately, I wish this were not true. I wish it were a non-bipartisan issue and there were no anti-Semitism. But the vast disproportion is inside the Democratic Party right now, which is why the Democratic Party seems unable to divide off from, say, Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib. Yeah. It's why they've had such trouble in simply declaring the obvious, which is that Hamas should surrender.
What makes this worth paying attention to is how much the 2024 election comes down to something that doesn't always show up in campaign speeches: turnout. Presidential elections aren't won simply by convincing undecided voters. They're also won by motivating people who might otherwise stay home. And that's where the couch joke actually points to a serious political reality. Younger voters, lower propensity voters, and people who feel disconnected from both parties can dramatically change the outcome in a close election. In 2020, turnout surged to levels America hadn't seen in decades, and that created an unusually large electorate. Assuming every future election will automatically reproduce that participation is risky for either party. The anti-Semitism discussion also deserves more nuance than partisan scorekeeping. Anti-Semitism has appeared across the political spectrum, including among extremists on the far right and some activists on the far left. Treating it as exclusively a Democratic or Republican problem misses the broader reality. Political leaders should condemn it consistently, regardless of whose supporters are responsible. At the same time, criticism of Israeli government policy isn't automatically anti-Semitic, just as criticism of American foreign policy isn't automatically anti-American. The important distinction is whether someone is criticizing a government's actions or targeting Jewish people as a group. That standard matters because foreign policy debates become dangerous when legitimate disagreement gets conflated with bigotry. A serious political party should be capable of defending its allies, confronting anti-Semitism, and still allowing debate over military strategy and diplomacy. Ultimately, voters deserve arguments based on evidence rather than partisan loyalty. That applies to turnout, foreign policy, and everything in between.
It's why Joe Biden, by the way, the other night, even at that foreign policy supposedly masterful display, he had a tough time explaining exactly. He didn't mention the word hostages one time when he was discussing Israel and Hamas. And there are 5 American hostages sitting in Hamas tunnels right now, and he's still talking about slow-walking military aid to Israel to finish off that war. That is because he is deeply concerned that he's going to lose that part of his base that is anti-Semitic.
Let's be fair. There's anti-Semitic, but it's not equal. There's only one party in Congress that equated Hamas equal to America in the same party.
Well, I mean, but
they're sitting elected to
let me also just call bullshit for 1 second, because there was a $31 billion MOU that was signed by what president? Barack Obama. F-35s were delivered to Israel under what president? Barack Obama. The Iron Dome was created under what president? Barack Obama. And so, I've been somebody who's always said that Israel is an American value. I've always said that. October 7th was one of the most devastating days that I've ever seen with my own eyes.
The Democratic Party is not the same party that Obama had today.
Wait, hold on. It actually is. And Barack Obama signed into law the Iran nuclear deal. Barack Obama made Benjamin Netanyahu walk out of the back door of the White House. Barack Obama was the most anti-Israel president in the history of the United States.
No, he wasn't.
Yes, he was.
Yes,
he was.
Every American
the only possible
president
exception might have been H.W. during his term.
I think that's a teapot, whatever, a teapot. But every president, every American president has been a strong backer of Israel.
And that's what I just
we're talking about the rank and file now. We're talking about people now.
But this is also the problem with the issue and the conversation that we're having. Because back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way through those early times, Israel was truly a bipartisan American value type of conversation. Until Bibi Netanyahu came and spoke at this.
No.
And I'm just telling you, those two men did not like each other. They despised each other personally.
For a person who served in Congress during that time and watched
you can see the rifts and how
it was Obama and Iran cutting a deal directly against, where Schumer even sat there and was quiet, where Steny Hoyer let it go through. That was the turning point.
Okay.
No, never again. We would go to Israel together. Never again. He broke it.
The partisanship that we're discussing right now, the fact that this has become a partisan issue is why it's wrong.
Okay.
And I tell people that all the time.
What makes this interesting is that the history of US-Israel relations is far more bipartisan than the argument on stage suggests. For decades, Democratic and Republican administrations have provided Israel with military assistance, diplomatic backing, and security cooperation. That makes it difficult to honestly frame support for Israel as something that belongs exclusively to one political party. And there's another important piece of context. Disagreements between presidents and Israeli leaders are hardly new. George H.W. Bush had major disputes with Israel over settlements, while Barack Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu famously clashed over Iran policy. Yet those disagreements never erased America's broader security relationship with Israel. That distinction matters because criticizing a particular Israeli government or policy isn't automatically hostility toward Israel. The same principle should apply when discussing anti-Semitism. It absolutely deserves condemnation wherever it appears, but political arguments become weaker when isolated incidents are treated as proof that an entire party shares the same beliefs. Both parties have had members and supporters make offensive or bigoted statements, and responsible leaders should confront them without turning the issue into a partisan weapon. The Iran nuclear deal is another example where the history gets complicated. Supporters argued it restricted Iran's nuclear program through inspections and limits, while opponents believed it failed to address Iran's broader regional behavior. You can debate that policy without pretending either side has always been uniformly pro or anti-Israel. Ultimately, the strongest argument here is that Israel's security should remain a bipartisan American commitment, not another political football.
I agree on that.
Yeah, but I have to call bullshit on this.
On me or him?
Him.
Okay.
On this with the Iran deal, because I hear this all the time. And this is kind of germane to our discussion before about the immunity, because the fear is that, as soon as a president leaves office, he's going to be prosecuted and persecuted for something he did while he was in office. And the Supreme Court said, but yeah, presidents while in office do things that they think at the time are best for the country. I didn't think going into Iraq that George Bush did was the best thing for the country, but I think he did. And you can't go after a president for that. Obama thought making a deal with Iran was the best thing for this country, and it may have been. We don't know, because your asshole boyfriend pulled out. And
we do know.
The idea,
No.
the idea was to bring Iran, which is not a country of unsophisticated people, into the fold, into the family of nations.
And here's how it
And,
works.
and it was a very effective deal. They would not have been able to produce a bomb for the next 15 years. We have the facts of this.
Let me
It had
return
a
with facts
sunset
on the
provision
bullshit.
on the Iran deal that allowed them at a certain point to have a bomb. Not only that, as John Kerry, the Secretary of State, openly acknowledged, it allowed for the development of ballistic missile technology. It made Iran part of the world economy again. When Joe Biden came into office and reoriented the Middle East away from the Abraham Accords and started trying to recut a deal with Iran, Iran got significantly stronger, and it is now Iranian agents in Yemen, in Lebanon,
Well, they're going to
in
have
Syria,
they're going to have
in
a bomb a
Jordan,
lot.
in Jordan.
They're going to have the bomb a lot sooner.
But you know what? But you know how they paid for it? When Biden came to office, they produced 4,000 barrels a day. Today, they produce more than 1 million barrels a day.
Of
oil. We still have the sanctions against their oil, but Biden allows them to sell it. That's where they started funding all the terrorism around. You want to know what happened on October 7th? Never would have happened had
when the
Biden
bomb
not
goes
allowed
off,
the money to
I
go.
don't really care how they paid for it, Kevin.
But they couldn't have done it if they didn't have
No,
the
but
resources.
the goal is to stop Iran from getting a bomb.
Exactly.
And that's what the Iran nuclear deal was supposed to do.
It allowed in the agreement for them to have one.
Take Israel's perspective for just 1 second.
I
Why
always
did
do.
it, but why? No, but I mean, if one party has a relatively strong interest in Iran not getting a bomb, it would be Israel. More than the United States. They're the regional actor that Iran has threatened
And
with
plenty
bombs.
of people
Did Israel support the Iran deal or not?
Netanyahu did not.
No.
There were plenty of people in Israel
That
who
is not
did.
true. That's not
Of course
true.
it is.
By-
There was no dissent in Israel. You think Jews don't argue about this?
Bill, please name, seriously, please.
I've read it. I've read their columns.
Please name the political party that
I don't-
endorsed the Iran deal in Israel.
I don't remember. It was 10 years ago.
What makes this interesting is that the Iran nuclear deal was never really about trusting Tehran. It was about putting measurable limits on Iran's nuclear program and giving international inspectors access to verify compliance. That distinction matters because diplomacy doesn't require believing the other side is friendly. It requires creating consequences and verification strong enough to manage the threat. And there's another important piece that often gets lost. The agreement restricted Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, limited its enrichment level, and imposed extensive monitoring. Critics were right to point out that some restrictions had expiration dates, but that doesn't automatically mean the entire agreement was worthless. The real question is whether abandoning those restrictions produced a safer alternative. It also makes sense to separate Iran's regional aggression from the nuclear agreement itself. Iran's support for Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis is a serious issue, but the nuclear deal was specifically designed around preventing Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Expecting one agreement to solve every problem involving Iran was never realistic. And when people argue that Israel's position automatically settles the debate, that oversimplifies Israeli politics. Israeli leaders and security experts have disagreed sharply over whether engagement, military pressure, or negotiated restrictions provide the best long-term protection. That's why the strongest argument here isn't about which president was tougher, it's about results. If the goal is preventing a nuclear-armed Iran, then measurable inspections, restrictions, and enforcement mechanisms deserve to be judged on whether they actually reduced that risk, not simply on whether the agreement came from a democratic administration. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.